It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Just love those jams.
Oh, baby.
Howdy, and welcome to Secular Sexuality. I am Christy Powell, and here with me is Serafina Smith and Michelle Ogorzalek. We are going to be talking about gender confirmation and all of the kind of nitty-gritty aspects that can go into actually taking our genders and expressing them in the real world, and taking this sort of internal aspect of ourselves and making the rest of the way we present that part of our daily lives. Obviously, this is a very difficult topic for a lot of folks, and it's something that I think if you haven't had to go through in a way that is outside of the norm, outside of the way most people experience it, can be really confusing. You know, it seems to be one of those questions of, you know, why is this such a big deal? But I can say that it's very easy to say that when it's not a big deal, because you're just able to go along with the flow. You're able to sort of have everything easily laid out in front of you. And for the rest of us that don't necessarily have that opportunity, it is a very important thing, and it can be a very difficult thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing the amount of vision you get when you're outside of something instead of inside the water. Like, what do you mean water? I'm just swimming.
Yeah, when there's a giant snowplow clearing the path in front of you, it's very easy to be like, why is everybody having such a damn hard time walking in the snow? Like, this is not that big of a deal.
This is easy.
But for those of us who don't have a easily leveled path in front of us because of the way that we are, because of our genetics and the play of our own genetics and our own identity and our own experiences and how all of that fits together, as we're going to dive into a little bit, we have different paths that aren't necessarily cleared ahead of us. So I thank y'all so much for joining us as we kind of get into that this week. We definitely, the phone lines are already open, so please feel free to give us a ring. We're at 512-686-0279. And we'd like to talk to Michelle a little bit more about what it looks like when that path isn't just already paved for you and you're having to sort of take that role on.
Well, thanks for having me. So just to give a little bit of background, my experience, I'm a nurse. I'm a surgical nurse, and I've worked for a year and a half with a surgeon who does gender confirmation surgery, top surgery, bottom surgery, facial feminization, liposuction, kind of the whole gamut. And then before that, I helped to run a queer people of color group in my college, which is Rutgers University in New Jersey. So to give a little bit of regional context there.
Just for in the most vague terms, top surgery, bottom surgery, what are we talking about here?
So for someone so I had a lot of trans friends and partners in college who told me, depending on what age they first started to identify, maybe not as cisgender, or start to have ideas of like, hey, I don't feel quite comfortable in my body. They told me they had a deep sense of not feeling comfortable in the bodies that they were in, and trying to reconcile that with their identity. And so just an overview, top surgery is if you're transitioning from female to male, having breasts removed and having sort of male contoured chest. And then if you're transitioning from male to female, having breasts added. So breast construction, basically. And then bottom surgery would be taking genitalia and making them into the gender that you are interested in embodying to match how you feel.
So this is basically about landscaping our bodies on the outside to match what we experience and how we identify on the inside.
Yeah. There are some other things too. So a lot of my trans friends said that they were not interested in surgery at all, which is perfectly an acceptable choice. And some people decided to do sort of smaller procedures or just hormone replacement therapy. You can do facial feminization, facial masculinization, so kind of contouring, maybe a little liposuction and different like cheek implants or chin implants or moving the hairline. There's a bunch of surgical options. And a lot of people, luckily now, a lot of companies are listing different procedures in terms of their what they cover for their health insurance, which is awesome.
Oh, nice.
That did not used to be the case. So a lot of people, it's covered and it's affordable. I can't really speak to how much it costs because I'm not involved in billing, but
Well, and I mean, healthcare is the sort of thing where, I mean, even something as simple as a couple of aspirin can cost, 25 cents out of the vending machine, or if a hospital and insurance and all these other things get involved, potentially hundreds of dollars for a couple of pills. So it's certainly not cut and dry.
Yeah.
That being said, what you're talking about sounds like cosmetic surgery in the same way that we think of, liposuction or rhinoplasty. Is it that? Is it not that?
I think it depends on the context in which. So, I mean, from my point of view, that would be the type of surgery and the type of surgeon. So a person looking for that type of procedure might go to a plastic surgeon who would have experience in plastic and reconstructive surgery. But I think plastic surgery implies elective, and I think a lot of trans folks don't see it as just, I would rather look this way.
Right.
I think it's much more serious and important to live as the person that they really are.
There's more to this for a lot of folks anyway than just vanity.
Yeah, definitely. Can be more. So my favorite part of working with a surgeon who did gender reassignment surgery and gender confirmation surgery was the patients. I had patients. So I worked there for a year and a half, and I took care of a couple hundred, maybe close to 1,000 patients. And my patients came from all over the world, all over the country, and they were wonderful to work with. Most people, so in my previous experience, most people who get surgery, they need their gallbladder out, they were in a car accident, they broke a bone, and they're not happy to be there. And so I only work in surgery. So normally people are like, it's the worst day of my life.
Most people aren't looking forward to going under.
Yeah, they're scared to go under the knife.
Sure.
And I think it's perfectly reasonable. I happen to know that it's pretty damn safe nowadays, luckily. But the patients that I had were super excited, and they were like, this is the best day of my life. They were so thankful to be there. And that was really refreshing to have patients who really desperately wanted surgery and felt that it was a vast improvement in their lives.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Really beautiful thing to be a part of. I think the first question that really jumps out at me is, why are people coming from all over the world? I mean, is this something that, we're here in Austin, we're in a major city, and we have a pretty big medical complex here. So I would understand if somebody from a smaller city nearby was traveling to Austin, but is this not something that you can just do anywhere? I mean, what does that look like?
No, there are very few surgeons in the world who do bottom surgery. And there are more, but still not very many surgeons who do top surgery. And some surgeons only do male to female or female to male, depending on their experience. So it can be hard to find a surgeon. And then insurance coverage is a different thing. Yeah. I think my first patient was from New Zealand.
Wow.
Yeah.
So very few of the people who are undergoing these types of procedures woke up yesterday and thought to themselves, yeah, I think I'll probably go to the doctor. And, this is not like going in and buying a car. Even as expensive as that is, it's not something that you can just do at one of a dozen different shops all over any major city.
Yeah, I think on a Monday I'll just, as far as I understood, the surgeon that I worked with, you needed to have, in order to be approved for the surgery, you needed to have 2 letters of recommendation, for lack of a better word, from 2 different psychotherapists, and be on hormone replacement therapy for, I want to say 2 years, but I could be off about that because I didn't really do the pre-op stuff. But as far as I understood, you had to be thinking and wanting to do this for several years before you were even allowed to.
Yeah, there are a lot of hoops you got to jump through first.
Yeah.
And back in my day, there was basically like 2 surgeons in the world who were doing it. So it's amazing that it's even as available as it is now.
Yeah. It was a dream job of mine for a long time, and I thought I would have to move to find a surgeon to work with. And then one of them just up and moved to Austin, blew my mind, and I started working with him.
Well, sure, Sarah, I don't know if there's anything that jumps out at you, but I think my biggest question remaining is, why go into that? Why was that your dream job that you lucked into with this opportunity?
Well, I had always loved surgery. So when I became a nurse, I started working in surgery, and I knew a bunch of trans folks in college. Most of my social group was queer and LGBT identified, and my nursing school, while pretty wonderful, I'll say, did lack talking about how to treat LGBT patients, especially trans patients. And so I thought, this needs to change. And how do I do that? How do I combine my love of queerness and queer community and surgery and medicine? And so I had a couple different options I could pick, but this kind of came together all in Austin.
Are you still doing that, or is that?
No, I currently work part-time at the downtown hospital at the trauma center.
What changed? I'm just curious.
I was working 2 part-time jobs, which
fun.
adds up to more than 1 full-time job.
It's weird how that works.
Yeah.
It can, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're super happy to have you, and we definitely want to make sure everybody knows that you're going to be here as we take calls, and if anybody has any questions, we definitely want to get into that. Before we do, I know that Sarah wanted to talk to us about I think, I don't want to speak for you, but maybe sex and gender as concepts, or?
Yeah. I mean, everyone has an opinion on sex and gender because it's something that we're all going through. But a lot of people have some pretty sort of kindergarten versions, I guess I would say. And so I just wanted to talk about sex and gender because I get into a lot of talks about it because I'm trans. I'm out about it and have been for a long time. And so I get a lot of people wanting to be educated and a lot of people who don't necessarily want to be educated but just want to argue. So either way, I like to put out some education here, and this was a great opportunity. So we have a little slideshow, and you can't see it because it's small, but it will help me along as I talk. So so whenever someone starts talking about sex and gender, I like to start with the question, like, what do you mean when you say it? What is it? Because a lot of the time people don't know what they're talking about or asking about. They don't have a firm definition of it because it's just always been assumed since we were born. And it's just sort of, it's like one of those, it's like I said before, the water that we're swimming in, and we don't notice the water because we don't have to.
The snowplow has just kind of cleared everything in front of us. And so for most folks, there's not really any opportunity to question because there's sort of a path laid out in front of you.
So we've got sort of 3 sort of levels of understanding that I generally come into, which is people who have like a kindergarten sort of level of like, I don't know, boys have a beepus and girls have a vagilu. And then sort of the next level where people talk about, well, there's the gender in your brain, and then there's the sex in your pants. But I try to strive for a little higher one because it's something that's always been important to me for probably obvious reasons. So I've had a lot of time to look at it. So I wanted to share with all of you some of the stuff that I've come up with. So, aspects of what we call gender and sex. There's a lot of them, a lot of different little things, what is the word I'm looking for? Phenomena. They're physical phenomena, social phenomena, mental, and it all comes down to a bunch of different stuff. So we've got, you can't see it, but I'll tell you. Oh, there you go. So we've got external and internal genitalia, their shape and function, gender roles. This is all stuff that we call sex and gender. Fat distribution, hormone balances, gender aesthetics, voice, how someone sounds when they speak, gender identity, genetics, gender expression, biological sex, legal sex, which are very closely aligned, bone structure, body and facial hair, and differences in the brain or mental differences. All of this stuff is stuff that we've all lumped together into this one or two concepts and pretend that they're the same thing. And it's really, really hindering when we try to discuss it with someone who's going through something that doesn't quite match up for. So I wanted to sort of take it all and try to put into some sort of understanding. So I tried creating a Venn diagram that we've got here. So I thought I'd put it into physical, mental, social, but that quickly didn't work because mental just sort of all fit into the physical or social anyway. So I put it into two different categories, physical and social. And found out that it's kind of surprising where a lot of this stuff falls. So there's some obvious stuff that goes into physical. You've got, you got your internal and external genitalia. Gender roles, obviously mostly social. Fat distribution, hormone balances, this is all sort of in the physical magisteria. Voice is very solidly in the middle. Gender aesthetics, gender identity over here in the physical. Bone structure, genetics. And then we got biological sex, perhaps surprisingly for some people, over here in social. And gender identity in physical. Seems a little weird. But I find that it's true because when we talk about your biological sex in our society, what we're talking about generally is you get born and a doctor or a nurse looks down between your legs, says, "Oh, that's a boy," or "That's a girl," and then they mark it onto a legal form, and for the rest of their life, that's it. They don't check your hormones, they don't check anything except what that little thing looks like down there.
So for all of the internet commenters that, say it's really about X and Y chromosomes, without even getting into that false dichotomy, we're not even doing that level of research.
Right.
For most folks.
If I could speak to it, I'm not a labor and delivery nurse, so I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that chromosome tests are very expensive.
Yeah.
So to do one on every baby that's born is just a ludicrous idea.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And it's much simpler to just look at the kid's genitalia and be like, it's a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go.
Yeah. And that's what we've been doing for, I don't know, however long we've been looking at sex.
At least as long as we've had forms and checkboxes.
Yeah.
And my theory is that if somehow we were in a world where we did that, I have a hunch that there would be a lot of kids who technically have a different, I should say non-standard chromosome makeup that would never present as anything other than cisgender.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. And this whole notion that we've got the two qualities of the XX and XY, just even that we have just those two is one big mistake. Because there are a lot of ways that it presents. And there's also the fact that even if we have someone who fits into the standard XY or XX, the way that expresses in the body can be extraordinarily different than what you would perhaps expect. There's recently been a story of someone who there was some confusion when she had a child because there was something with the genetics when they do a lot of tests. When you're having a baby. And they found out that she had purely XY chromosomes and had a fully functioning uterus that popped out a baby. And everyone had always assumed that she was fully XX. So it's completely more complicated than you're probably thinking.
So there's more to it than what the nurse sees when they
Yeah.
look down, for lack of a more palatable metaphor.
Right.
And there's more to it than that simple, X, XX, XY question. So gender is complicated, I think, is sort of the basic concept that we're looking at here.
Yeah. It's a lot of different things, and people try to make it into one thing or into two things. They say, oh, well, this is sex and this is gender. Well, there's a lot of different things that we're talking about and pretending that it's some simple thing. And that messes people up a lot. And that all comes from the fact that we produce, baby humans through a uterus. And so we have to have these two types of gametes, and those two types of gametes are what have formed our frickin' society, because when you have two types of gametes, you have to have one that goes in and one that holds it all and grows it all. And so that creates two different types of biological templates, one that goes in, one that stays in. And little gametes there, they're so happy. And those are like the closest to an actual binary that we get. Like everything else, like genital shape, mental brain, everything else is very not on a binary. So that's about as binary as we get. Two types of gametes. If you go beyond that, then you're getting into non-binary territory where it's not just there's men and then there's women and that's it. I don't know why I go like deep Alabama whenever I do that, but
Why
You know,
not?
I think it's
Why
an
not?
understood association. We don't need to dive too much into the
Fair enough.
geopolitics of that.
fair enough.
I think it's understood.
So yeah, so we have the two types of genitals, and at the beginning, that's all we knew is that people had two different types of genitals, and they tended to fall into different physical types when they had them, and those required different social roles. So we decided that they made different people, different kinds of people, and we built up all sorts of assumptions about those over time, and different roles in society, assumptions that, some were smarter or more logical than the others, and others were more emotional, etc. And we've just made this into this huge thing, so much so that when we got science and started to see physical things that could sort of align with it, we just assumed. We assumed it would all fall into this, and this XXXY thing means that these are the two sexes. And we have confirmed this. What's this? There's something else? No. We have confirmed this. Those are extraneous. Those are deviants. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of interesting. And we did the same thing with race, where we had science, and we're like, this obviously means that this race is inferior. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're starting to see more scientifically, and unfortunately, that is kind of slow to get into social consciousness and so that's why every week or two I see someone online telling me that the science obviously says that there's just two sexes. I mean, just look. Read a science book, people. So moving on, let's transition from the Venn diagram into a single circle now. So we got all these phenomena that make up sex and gender, and they're pretty connected in some ways, which has led to the confusion that we were just talking about. So let's talk about a fairly typical cisgender woman. We'll call her Cindy. So Cindy, gotta move on. Mm-hmm. Cindy gets born with the genetics that say female, and that leads to certain hormone balance, and the hormone balance just does all sorts of stuff with Cindy's body. Changes her fat distribution and her bone structure, and gives her different genitals and breasts and all sorts of things. It also influences her voice, the way she speaks, and Takes us, gives her a certain body and facial hair balance, which leads to some gender aesthetics, etc. So it's all connected in that way, right? And it all sort of lines up for Cindy because she has a gender identity that matches with that. She's understands that she's a woman and has never had a problem with that.
So one thing leads to another, and in this case, it's in a pretty linear fashion.
Right.
Where that genetics causes the hormones that causes the bodily changes that then represent what we understand and appreciate as a woman or as a cis woman.
Right. And since that matches up with how she feels inside, how her brain or whatever it is that triggers this has informed her that her internal gender is, then there's no problem, and everything assumes that it's just normal, right? But what if things don't match? So let's take the same situation, but for whatever reason, because we don't know what the reasons are yet. Maybe it's chemical balance in the womb, maybe it's genetic, maybe it's something else. Cindy's intrinsic sense of gender doesn't go the same way. Let's say in this case, it's not even close to female. It's very close to male. So we'll call him Tony. So instead, he gets the genetics, and it leads to the hormones going in the body fashion that we're expecting. But then something has happened, and then the gender identity doesn't match. So that means that his desire, he wants different gender expression, wants different gender roles, because there's this natural understanding that I should be recognized in society as who I am. So he starts maybe getting some dysphoria, perhaps in his body, perhaps with the way that he interacts in society, and he takes steps. So he'll change his hormones. He'll go on to different hormones, and it'll change his body. And so he'll start to look more like society expects a man to look like, and maybe people will start referring to him that way. He'll perhaps go on and change his name. He'll change his legal gender if he's allowed to in the state that he lives in, because that is definitely not a given. He'll change the way he expresses himself, the way he dresses, and the hormones that he takes changes his body. Maybe if he's got enough bodily dysphoria, perhaps he will go to a professional who can help him with surgery to make his body better. And so everyone starts to recognize him as a man, unless he tells them otherwise, because testosterone is a hell of a drug. It does a lot.
Yeah, I have heard, I can't quite recall the source, but I've heard that for women who have had vaginoplasty, so they are male to female, and they've had vaginoplasty, so they've had a vagina created, they have said that a gynecologist could not tell the difference.
Yeah.
Like, could not tell that they once had different genitalia.
Which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, science.
Well, and all of this is inevitably leading to answering some of our most important questions about gender and sex and identity. And I think we all are on the same page about what that is, right? Which is actually more painful, giving birth or getting kicked in the balls. And we are getting to a place scientifically, surgically, medically, where we are beginning to come up with answers to that important question.
Important question. Yes.
This is what all of this has been about.
It's good to have priorities. Yeah. All right. So let's move on a little bit. If the thing moves on. Come on. You can do it.
This laptop may be 100 years old. All
Anyway.
apologies.
So yeah, that's two examples. That's sort of the obvious ones, the cisgender person and the clearly transgender person. But there's a lot of different things. There's people who do not fall into that binary at all. People whose gender, internal gender marker is fluid. It's not set. There's people whose internal gender marker is set to nothing, and their best bet in life is to just try to not be recognized because they get dysphoria from being recognized either way. And there's people who have different genitalia than the usual things. There's various intersex conditions that I don't want to try to speak to because I am not intersex and don't want to be a representative of them. I don't know if I could do it right.
But genitals don't necessarily come in one of two packages.
Right, just like hormones don't, just like genetics don't.
I mean, I don't know how many dicks is a lot of dicks, but I feel like I've seen some dicks.
Why's it got to be all about the dick?
Well, because I feel like the variety is more striking. I don't know. I've definitely seen a lot of different types, and to know that there's more than even just those two options. I don't want to oversimplify, but
so out of all this, what really comes as importance to me is what we think is gender and sex is really just a bunch of different things that we're sort of forcing our own ideas onto, and we need to sort of step back from that and realize that it's more than we know. The second thing that's really important is when we look at all the massive amounts of things that we call gender and sex, what do we take as important? What to us determines someone's gender? And the answers, are going to depend on what you want and what your purpose is. If you are, for instance, an endocrinologist, then you're probably going to want to look mostly at hormones because that's your job. So, at least at work, you're going to care mostly about whether someone's got this level of hormones in their body or not. If, however, moving on, if you're a certain type of lawmaker in Texas, you might find yourself caring only about the shape of someone's external genitalia because of your deeply held belief that anyone who has or ever has had an Audi is a dangerous thing to have in a woman's restroom. For some reason.
The thing about that is how, politicians don't know. You're not seeing people naked going into public restrooms.
I sure hope not.
It's all about how people read and how, other markers, and that gets complicated and all sorts of things about that.
I think one of the takeaways I'm getting from what you're saying is that science has uncovered or had a deeper understanding of these differences and this incredible variety for a long time. Mm-hmm. But that isn't necessarily getting into the hands of lawmakers, policymakers, educators, the general public. And that's certainly one of the reasons why we're here, and one of the things that we like to do and make available is that sort of information, but it's not always getting to the people who are shaping the way that information is used.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think we can ignore the influence of sexism in research, in scientists. So there's an author named Emily Martin who wrote an essay quite a while ago that I read about so she gives a description of a different scientist saying, this is the description of how the sperm fertilizes the egg. And she highlights the language that scientist used, and it is incredibly sexist. The passive, very demure, very coy egg waits for the Trojan, masculine sperm. It wasn't that obvious, but it's a great essay, and it really highlights how, humans, even scientists, can be biased. A lot of scientists used to be, it was a male-dominated field for a long time, and we are still feeling effects of certain scientists, imposing their beliefs, consciously or unconsciously, on how we think of sex and gender and genes and biology and reproduction and all sorts of shit.
Mm-hmm. We're still being told when we talk about where babies come from that it's the fastest, strongest, most powerful sperm that gets to the egg and fertilizes it, when we've known for ages that that's not how that works.
No.
And all just because that's such a masculine notion that
it's a simple and appealing narrative.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It fits preconceived notions.
Right. Yeah.
So it really is all about what you think is important. And if you're like an edgelord on the internet, who I unfortunately have to talk to sometimes, you might think that it's all about hormones, even though you don't really know what hormones do, or even more so, you'll think it's about genetics and XXXY, even though you probably don't know anyone who actually has had their hormones checked for that. Not their hormones, their genetics checked for that. But anyway, in conclusion, let me read this off. In conclusion, what we call gender and sex is actually a big bundle of related but not necessarily connected phenomena. These phenomena don't really divide up clearly into two categories. Our cultures are filled with ideas and assumptions about them that largely predated scientific findings, shaped the way we have looked at said findings, and persist despite them. And the phenomenon that is most important regarding how a person should be seen, identified, and treated both personally and culturally, or put differently, what determines their sex and gender, is what we call gender identity, if you give a shit about people. So that's the takeaway.
Yeah, that if people actually take the time to think and to learn and to grow and to, be and do, not just accept what is immediately available, and are getting to know folks who have different experiences and different understandings instead of just blocking all of that out.
Mm.
Yeah.
Asking, how do you identify? Asking, not asking. Actually, a bad question to ask, I've been told, is, what used to be your name? Or what was your birth name? Or what did,
Mm-hmm.
And I can admit that, I don't think I've actually asked that question before I knew better, but I'm sure that I have asked ignorant questions before, just not knowing what was insensitive and what was not. But don't ever ask someone what their birth name used to be.
It's an understandable curiosity, and it probably seems, innocuous if you don't take into account the fact that this person has been asked that so many times.
And how personal it is.
It's so personal, and it's so invalidating, because you're basically saying, okay, I see this, but I want to know what's real.
Yeah. There's an implied.
Yeah, it's
judgment
like
there.
that question, like, oh, where are you from? No, where are you really from? As if the
Yeah.
way that somebody explains themselves, as if the place that they identify with. I mean, I have never actually received mail in the city that I tell people is my hometown, only because that's where I went to high school. I was living in a small town outside of that, but most of my formative experiences were in this city, and that's where I think of as where I'm from, or at least it's the easier way of telling people. And people don't push back on that because I'm a largely cis-presenting white guy. And so nobody is like, well, where are you really from?
Yeah.
My mom's from Alabama, my dad's from Louisiana. There's nothing super remarkable about that. And so people aren't trying to be voyeuristic about my story. If I had something that presented as if my story was maybe more interesting, more sexy, more dirty or appealing, at least in the eyes of an outsider, then yeah, people do dive into that. If you have a particular skin color, if you dress in a way that reflects a certain culture or religious belief, then yeah, people love to be voyeurs about that. And I think that it's very true about our sexuality as well, and our gender is part of that.
That Gujarati accent couldn't possibly be from Patterson, New
Right?
Jersey.
Clearly.
I was just in Jersey. Actually, no. Wow, I can't believe I said that. I was in Denver. Never mind.
It's the same place, right? Denver, Jersey.
Obviously.
Jet setter. Clearly, you won't be showing this to any of your family who would judge you for getting those two confused.
Hopefully not.
Well, I'll tell you what, we have just a few minutes before we want to get over to the phones. So we're going to play a quick game. Michelle, this is your first time on the show. I have to warn you, Sarah, a little aggressive. And I like it.
Okay.
And I like it.
I can handle.
Yeah, okay.
Handle it.
So my favorite part, I think, about getting to MC these situations is that I get to just sick people on one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have protection.
Ooh.
I have finger cuts on in case you're not watching live.
Yeah. Actually, if you can grab me
protection.
the jar of finger cots, Michelle is not going to get credit for the 2 that she stole.
One for each digit.
We're also, you're not going to reuse those.
No.
Why? Because we don't reuse condoms.
No
I
washing.
can't say it too many times. We don't reuse condoms.
And neither can the CDC.
So we will continue to say that. So the way the game is played, I need a first volunteer.
Oh.
All right. So Michelle is going to put on her face mask, her eye mask.
Blindfold.
Blindfold.
I prefer the term.
Right. And I'm going to throw this slide on the screen. Sarah and I, we can see it. There is both a word that we need for Michelle to say and a list of words underneath that we cannot say. All right. And we're going to put
Is this timed?
5 minutes on the clock, starting now.
5 minutes. Oh, for multiple. Okay.
All
I'll
right.
shut up.
So if you want to get off,
Orgasm. Ejaculate.
This is the reading that you would do in order to... yeah, keep going.
Erotica. Lit porn.
Yep, there you go. Erotica.
Oh, wow. Easier
reading
than I
was
thought.
one of the words.
Oh, I said one of the words? Damn it. I'm terrible at this, hosting this. Okay.
This is his game. All right.
This is a lady of a certain age,
Drag queen. Cougar.
like that.
And there's an acronym about it.
A cougar chick. Wait. Keep going.
So if you've seen American Pie, it was mentioned there.
Oh, shit. Long time ago.
It is a...
MILF?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
oh,
All right.
Sweet.
Okay.
Coitus with
More than
than two.
and
Orgy.
less than 4.
Threesome. Menage a trois. Okay. Wait, I got it? With
Yep, you
threesome?
got it. All
Okay.
right.
was great.
Next question.
If you want to get off and there's no one around, you might
Masturbate.
use a...
Dildo? Vibrator.
Yes.
Yep, there you go.
These are easy.
Or if you want something a little more powerful than that,
Hitachi magic wand.
Wow. Okay.
Wait, is that one?
That's
Yes.
1,000% correct. That was quick.
you are awesome. Okay, and if you don't want it in that hole, but perhaps
Not the front,
Anal. Not the front.
but
Right.
the back.
but not with a person, with a piece of equipment that goes in
Anal
there.
plug, anal beads.
Butt
plug.
There you
yes,
go.
There you go.
This is a type of relationship that,
Poly.
yeah, but like without all of the love and the closeness
Swingers.
and the, yeah, but this is maybe like a fuck buddy. This is
What Pinocchio didn't have this.
Ashton
Geppetto?
Kutcher made a terrible movie.
The butterfly effect? Oh, a unicorn? No.
We should move on.
No strings attached.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Oh gosh.
Wait, that was the answer, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another word for attractive married lady.
A vixen or a cougar.
MILF? We already did MILF.
N-
Not a mom.
Literally,
Right. Wilf?
different word for attractive and different word for married lady.
Sexy concubine. What? I can't think of it. More. Give me more.
And you wanna call it?
Call
you wanna
it.
pass?
Next.
Yeah, it was Hot Wife.
Oh,
All right. The people who came to your clinic were not this.
patience.
No, they weren't.
When you're
Cisgender?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, crikey. How do
This
we
is
say
a
that without
medication that you might take if you had a particularly important virus.
Medication? Like
to-
HIV for antiretroviral?
Yeah,
Uh-huh, yeah.
Not if you have it, but if you are trying to avoid
Oh, PrEP?
getting
Yes,
it.
Truvada?
Yeah, there you
Come
go.
on.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you are going out with someone that you don't know, it's a
One night stand.
If you were wearing like what you
Blind
have
date.
on your
Blind
face.
date.
Yeah, blind
Yeah.
date. Wow, that was quick. All right. Okay, this is the last one. Let's see how quickly you can get it.
famous model, dark hair.
Is she a new girl?
1940s?
Megan Fox?
No, 1940s.
Yeah. So
Not Marilyn Monroe.
wore a lot of dark colors.
Like Marilyn Monroe, but dark hair. Often contrasted with. No? Not
Rhymes
up
with?
on your vintage pinup BDSM porn?
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This is Betty
like-
Page.
That was Betty.
Oh, damn. I never would have got that.
No? Okay.
I like the decade we're living in now.
I mean-
sort of.
Fair enough.
You
Can I
like
take this
you like
off?
our modern day porn stars? Yes.
I mean, who does?
Okay. So we
How many
that's
cots?
9 points, I believe.
That's wow. That's almost 2 full hands of cots.
Very impressive for a
you.
first timer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you like your cots?
Good job.
Yes. I want to collect my cots.
Collect your cots.
Your cots. Thank you.
It's okay. We weren't going to reuse them anyway.
That's right.
Sure you weren't.
All right. Well, I think we are
we're back. Okay.
ready to take some calls.
Fine.
Yeah.
No blindfold for me.
We'll give you a chance to compete later. I feel bad that Ankit has been waiting on the line for quite a while now, so I just want to check in. We do still have some lines open, so please feel free to give us a call. Number right there on the screen. And forgive me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but Ankit would like to hear from you.
Hi, Christy. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, you're on the air.
Hi. Nice to speak to you all. This is my first time calling any of your shows.
Yay.
Hey, thanks so much for
Been a
joining
fan
us.
of a lot of them.
I'm happy to be your first.
Yeah. So, just to give you a little bit of context, I'm from America. I mean, I'm living in America, but I grew up in India.
Okay.
Yeah. And I grew up in a Christian family in India, which is really rare because we're like 5% of the population, maybe less. Which in hindsight doesn't seem that bad because we're like 1.2 billion people. But yeah, Christian family in India, it's already kind of a conservative country. On top of that, you have my family, which is kind of conservative on top, which is another layer of conservatism. So what happened was I came here to do to study my master's. And what happened was I noticed that after having gone through India and after having gone through religion and coming out of it at the age of 24.
And how long ago was that, roughly? You don't have to tell us your exact age if you don't want. But is this recent, or is this something that you have been working through for a while?
3 years.
Okay.
3 years. No, I mean, it was a slow, kind of like a shedding off of religion.
Sure.
So first I was like, yeah, I'm going to listen to only the good parts. And then I'm like, I'm not going to go to church. And then I'm just like, yeah, you know what? At this point, I might as well just call it.
I've heard that story a lot.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a pretty common pathway.
Yeah. So yeah, the thing is when I sloughed everything off, I was like 24 and now I'm 27. And essentially I'm 27 years old. I've never had sex. I have never kissed a girl. I have literally just held hands with one at one point. And I fear that the longer I wait, the weirder it's going to become. And like the more I'm kind of like hyping it up in my own head. And at the same time, I don't have that urge to go out and just do it. I've spoken to like a bunch of friends, and they're just like, you know what? Go to a strip club. Go to get an escort, a prostitute. Or I'm sorry for the word, but yeah. But that's not something I want to do, and I'm kind of afraid that if going forward, it might be weird. If you've seen the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin, you know what I mean.
Yeah, we definitely do stigmatize and put a lot of pressure, and we make it weird in the sense that we sort of collectively, and I don't think I say we, anybody at this table, but we as a culture do look down on them. We do talk about it in those sorts of terms and using that verbiage, and I recognize how tricky that is, but I feel like we've kind of danced around what is really, for me, the central aspect of all this, which is wherein lies the problem? Are you concerned that you're going to be labeled as weird? Or is this something about yourself that you're wanting to change? I mean, are you wanting to be in a relationship? Are you wanting to be dating, falling in love, having sex, any of those which don't necessarily need to go together? But are those the sorts of things that you're looking for and wanting in your life right now?
Right. Outside of like external societal expectations, do you care? Is it something that is important to you?
Is it wrong if I say both?
No, not at all. Understandable.
Yeah. So on one hand, I am. It's not like I'm asexual. I do see people. I am attracted. I do want to get into a relationship. I do want to fall in love, all of those things. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there's like an anxiety about it, which is kind of like, oh, you know what? Will they like me if they know that I haven't slept with anyone before? If they know that I am there first? There's that. There is an anxiety about it,
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I can definitely recognize that there is an opportunity for pushback, that should you find somebody that you want to pursue a relationship with, there might be a situation in which they would judge you or look down or just feel confused about your experience. But that's not the type of pushback that you need to put a lot of credence in. So the big question that I still feel like maybe you're working to resolve, and I don't want to assume that there's ambivalence in you, or just because I hear it in your voice, I don't want to tell you about you since we just met. But I really am wondering if you've stopped to ask yourself the question of, do I want to be dating right now? Maybe you're not asexual, maybe you do have those sexual desires, but is it something that you really would want to act on at this moment in your life? Imagine a world in which it was easy, which it may or may not be. I mean, dating, love, we wouldn't be here talking about it every week if sex and love and all of that was easy. But imagine a world in which it was, in which you meet a wonderful coworker, y'all hit it off right away, and everything's going well. Is there room for that in your life right now? And is that something that you want? And if so, we can talk about how to get from here to there. But I wouldn't go barreling towards something just because you're, quote, supposed to, just because that's the popular narrative, just because there's a Judd Apatow movie about it. I do base most of my life decisions on whether or not there's a Judd Apatow movie about it. But in this instance, I would recommend against that.
No, it's not just because there's a movie out there. I think it's more, how do I put it? It's a problem that it's an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, essentially. So I see a girl, I like the girl, I talk to them, I'm afraid to ask the person out because I'm afraid that they will say, "Oh my God, you're weird, you're such a creep," that sort of stuff. And especially with news and stuff recently, I'm really sorry about it. I feel awful for the victims. But you see news about people who have done terrible, awful things just because they've been frustrated and they're hateful people. And everyone seems to be demonizing the involuntary celibates. I think that's the word. But yeah, I mean, like it or not, I'm one of them.
I mean, we don't look down on them because they don't have sex. We look down on them because they're dicks. To be fair.
Yeah, being involuntarily celibate doesn't necessarily lump you in with the incel movement.
Yeah.
If we even want to acknowledge or call it that.
No, please kill it.
Yeah.
With fire.
Well, I think part of the problem is we don't educate men on how to flirt with women in a way that's respectful. Like, we don't teach boys or guys or men, hey, it actually would be pretty appropriate for you to compliment a woman or a girl on her intelligence or something smart she said, or, how ambitious she is in XYZ, and then to suggest, would you like just to ask, would you like to get coffee? And then leave it at that, and to actually respect the answer. If the answer is no, or ambivalent, or ask me later, or get lost, creep, whatever the answer is.
Yeah, to receive that answer. I think from what your description, the thing that really came to mind about what you're experiencing is it reminded me basically of panic disorder. If I may oversimplify or borrow a metaphor, panic disorder is this situation in which you get these incredible, hyperventilating, anxiety-ridden experiences that can cause people to pass out, can cause people to feel completely trapped and overwhelmed. And there are these brief episodes of just being completely overwhelmed. And I'm not saying that you have panic attacks, but what I'm bringing up is the fact that panic attacks aren't really caused by a thing so much as they are caused by the fear of or expectation of having a panic attack. So often people are so nervous about freaking out. They're so freaked out about the idea of freaking out that they end up freaking themselves out. And I don't certainly mean to oversimplify that, but I wonder if to an extent a lot of what is so difficult about this is the fact that it was hard once and it didn't go well, and so the second time you were maybe a little bit more nervous, and so that nervousness maybe affected your performance. And by performance, I just mean the way that you tried to be charming, the way that you communicate, the way that you flirt or ask somebody out, and then that anxiety maybe got in the way of things going well. So now, third time, you're, again, a little bit more anxious because you've gotten shot down twice before. And that can kind of build and build and build on itself to this point where even the idea of talking to a woman or asking somebody out can feel completely overwhelming, when in reality, you are perfectly equipped to date, to be loved, to have sex, to, whatever it is that you might want to do. You have that inside of you, and it just may not feel like it right now. And I know that, a stranger on the internet telling you that you have these abilities may not be overwhelmingly convincing, but I would encourage you to take steps to unlock those things in yourself.
So on that, would you say that it's, so I don't know when it's appropriate really to ask someone out. How long do I wait? When am I waiting too long? Do I risk losing a friend? There's a lot of things that I'm asking myself before I make any of these decisions,
Sure.
I think it's less about time and more about context, really. Like if you're talking to someone on Tinder, then the time is like after, a few paragraphs.
Second.
Seems that way. As long as you're polite and respectful about it. If you're at a singles bar, likewise, it's pretty clear that it's a fairly easy step to make is to go towards that. If you're in a workplace, it's far more awkward to do that because you're talking to people who have to be with you all the time.
Well, I think Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go on.
I think relationships are also a two-way street. So, let's say that you have a friendship with someone and you have feelings for them and ask them out. If they say no, if the question after is, are we going to remain friends? It's, partly up to each person how they interact with each other. I've had friends that we remain friends after one person expressed interest and the other person rejected them. I've also had friendships that did not survive that, but I think it depends on the people. And I think I want to say there's a little bit of like how it is phrased, like how the one person says, I have feelings for you. If you profess deep love, that's setting up very high stakes. So if the person doesn't feel that way, they might feel guilty for rejecting you. They might feel awkward. They might feel like you're going to be in love with them till the end of time and, all sorts of imaginative possibilities. But I think keeping it low stakes, would you like to go out for coffee or dinner or something slightly romantic? You could hint at I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas here.
Yeah, I think that's the way of going about it in terms of practical, a very soft invitation. But I think the undercurrent of that is that there's no expectation, right? Expressing your feelings towards somebody does not create in them a sense of obligation. Or if you present it as if it should, as if, well, because I said this to you, now you have to do something. That's the male entitlement that the Me Too movement and all of these uncomfortable things that we're discussing have come out of. So if you remove that and simply say, this is how I feel, this is what I'd like. I would like to have a cup of coffee with you, knowing that a question isn't really a question if there isn't a range of acceptable answers. And if no is a perfectly acceptable answer, then I think that's a perfectly acceptable question. Am I off base?
Yeah.
No, I like it.
Okay. Well, I really do appreciate you calling in. I want to get to a couple of folks that have also been waiting, but I wanted to make sure that there was nothing else that we might have missed. And if so, that you can definitely continue this conversation off air. Our email address is cycling through the screen, and we would love to hear from anybody that we don't get a chance to talk to.
Yeah, it was great talking to you guys. Big fan of your show.
Hey, thank you so
we'll
much.
Keep watching.
Thank you.
Glad to hear it.
you.
Thank you so much. Okay, and now we're going to speak to Adrian in Colorado.
Hi.
Hi, you're on the air.
Do I sound okay? I'm in a bathroom. So.
You sound great.
Okay. So I called because I'm sorry. I have anxiety. So if I pause, just forgive me. Anyway, I called because I have been having a lot of strong feelings about a sort of controversial topic, polyamory. For a long time now, I'm actually an advocate at this point, but I feel.
Forgive me for interrupting you right out of the gates, but let me just throw out there, no controversy at this table. We totally support any form of love and expression that is full of consent and kindness. And so, yeah, we've definitely got your back and would love to hear why this is difficult for you.
Okay. Well, to give you an idea of why it's difficult for me, I'm going to have to walk you through where I have been in life. So for the first 14 years of my life, I was a fundamentalist Christian. I didn't know what gay meant until 8th grade. I actually knew I was trans since I was, by the way, I'm trans. I knew I was trans since I was in 3rd grade. I'm male, by the way, just haven't transitioned. And I finally broke out of that at about 14, about my freshman year of high school. That was really scary, and I sort of found out I was gay. I thought I was gay for a long time because of some trauma I had with a pedophile piece of shit. So, and recently, 2 years ago, about I sort of found myself in the furry fandom. And if you know anything about us, we're very sexually open people.
Cool.
And I entered my first polyamorous relationship about 1.5 years ago, and it was pretty much the best relationship I have had in my life.
Yay.
Hey, good for you.
It's just, the consent was there, and I found myself just very happy and enjoying myself, I guess, for the first time in a relationship with males also. So that was fun. Recently, I entered into a relationship with my current boyfriend, who is also trans, and we are looking to get a third, but we're facing a lot of controversy for that. And I've just always sort of faced controversy for being polyamorous, and like people are constantly posting. What are your thoughts on it? Just in general, because I am sort of getting mixed results when I talk to people.
Yeah, I think that we would say first and foremost, be you and live the life that you want to live. And even as people are putting pressure, are telling you the way that things should be and telling you who to be and how to be, live the life that you want to live. Now, that being said, you exist in a world that is far from perfect and that is full of assholes and
Flaws.
controversies and flaws. So you have to know that being out and being comfortable and open and talking about these things is going to, I hate to say that it invites criticism, because no, you're just being you. If somebody else chooses to be an asshole, that's really their fault, not yours. But you are going to have to live with it. So that being said, I would tell you if you feel like you need to dive in on how to handle that, on how to cope with that, Elizabeth Sheff has a great book. The Polyamorous Next Door is a great place to start if you are looking at sort of how to live and be and do and function as an out poly person. And beyond that, it's really about mitigating the difficulty that other people are creating, right? It's not about changing who you are. It's not about avoiding what you want or giving up on your passions or your dreams or your love or your sex or what have you. It's about figuring out how to have all of those things without getting just constantly beaten down by the world, or understanding how to process and work through those things as you do exist in this imperfect and flawed world.
So I will.
That makes.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
That makes a lot of sense. I definitely feel like polyamory is very, very stigmatized. Like, I've told my dad, who is still rather Christian, but not to the point he was before. He's a lot more open-minded. I've told him that I'm trans. I've told him that I'm bi. I've told him that I'm a freaking furry, but I still can't tell him that I'm polyamorous. And I talk to my sister about it a lot. And she is like, I think polyamory is gross. I think it's weird. Like, I respect you as a person, but I think that's weird. And then she goes and tells me that she cheated on her boyfriend. I'm like, what do you mean? She is the just opposite of me. She is.
I think every poly person has gotten the judgmental lecture from the cheater and the sneak arounder.
Yeah, right? Like, we're consensual. I feel like, here's a good analogy that I've sort of come across recently. Polyamory is to sex as... polyamory is to a relationship... Polyamory is to cheating as sex is to rape. The difference is, consent. So.
I mean, that's incredibly accurate and visceral, honestly, but true.
Yeah, I feel like that one really gets through to people.
So I will come out as poly and queer. And for me personally, the book More Than Two was very helpful. And I also find that when I unconsciously distance myself from queer media, poly positive stuff, if I'm not consuming articles or around supportive people, if I sort of fall back on this living life in kind of the default. Now, I personally, I don't have a TV. I don't watch mainstream media. I try to consume as little mainstream media as possible because I find it toxic to my psyche. But
Meanwhile, Sarah and I just have debates about which Netflix shows have the best poly representation in them.
well, yeah, and so I
It's
try
Sense8.
to. It's what?
Sense8.
I concede. BoJack Horseman, close second.
Man, they totally baited us on what was it called? That spooky show that everyone likes. The three kids who were like going through the D&D thing, like
Stranger
Stranger
Things.
Things, yeah.
Stranger Things. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. I watch it avidly.
Well, basically,
But
You're saying that representation matters.
yeah. And the more I surround myself with positive vibes, the better I feel, which every time I realize that, it seems to be cyclical. Every few weeks, I think, why do I feel like crap? Why do I feel like the whole world is against me? I'm like, oh yeah, because I haven't been absorbing positive messages. And I mean, it seems kind of silly, but it's helpful to remember to surround yourself with positive vibes and people who support you.
All right.
yep.
Adrian, you seem like a nice guy, so I'm gonna lay down some wisdom from a poly elder here. Been at this game a while. People are going to judge you for it, and the only way, literally the only way to get past that is with time and people seeing that it's working for you, that it's good for you. It's going to take time and it's going to suck for a while. Sorry about that. It's just true. But it will get better because people will have to eventually recognize, oh, hey, this person is in this relationship, which I don't understand, but it's making them happier than they've ever been. So I guess maybe I'll invite that other person over for dinner or something. Mm-hmm. It takes time, but it is the only way to go. Another piece of advice I'm going to give you for free is let your heart and like the people that you want to be with guide you more than your concept of a relationship. When you said we're looking for a third, that like set off alarm bells in my head because that's a thing I hear all the time.
We're not looking.
Right.
We're not looking. We added, or
Gotcha.
we're like thinking about adding a person that we already knew. Like we like them. Like we're not looking. We're not searching out.
Gotcha. Just wanted to make sure to make that clear. You know, just be who you are and be who you're with, and you don't have to have your relationship be a certain way.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely been through harder than this. So, like, my mom's dead and stuff. So, I think I can get through this. It just makes me damn mad.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you can do this because you have done more and more difficult than this. But it is tricky, and so I'm glad that we can be part of that positive messaging, those positive vibes, and a little bit of representation. And I would just encourage you as you're going through this sort of crappy experience, and in some ways crappy. I don't want to overstate it because it seems like you two have not only formed a beautiful relationship for yourselves and with each other, but you have opportunity, and opportunity is always exciting. And so that should be really the banner here. It shouldn't be all of the crap that other people have to say about it. It should be, well, why wade through all of that crap? Because there's somebody that, you know, whether it's love or sex or both, that you're excited about. And that is exciting. And that's worth getting worked up about. But when life does get you down, bubble baths, soft music, and shows and forms of media that do represent you and that show that people can be happy like you. People like you can be happy and have beautiful lives.
Well, thank you so much.
I'm glad to hear from you. Thank you so much for giving us a call.
Good luck.
High five.
All right. And I believe we're going to go and speak to Ming, who has an interesting question.
Awesome.
Hi, Ming. You're on the air.
Hello, Christy. Hello, Serafina. Hello, Michelle.
Howdy. How can we help you tonight?
So based on what Serafina represent about, there are a lot of varieties among people, and also when you mention Tinder, so I wonder if you think that there is something called sexual racism.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the verbiage is a little different because racism refers specifically to people's race. But if you're asking if people are discriminated against because of their gender, because of their sexuality, because of their orientation and these different things, is that at the heart of what you're meaning?
No. What I mean is like if you see a lot of ads on let's say Drive, for example, a lot of people will post something like no black, no Asian, no long hair, no feminine, no black, etc. And immediately people say that is racism because you somehow exclude the other group because they don't fit your category of attraction. But I mean that if attraction is somehow hardwired in our brain, then how can we think that is racism? That's thing I don't really understand.
That's a complicated one, and I tend to come at it from two directions. One, yes, you can't really necessarily control who or what you're attracted to. That's normal. Two, who we are attracted to and what we are attracted to also is affected by what we absorb from our culture and the ideas that we have. And so, like, I wouldn't want to say, oh, hey, you're a racist because you said this. But I would want someone who is saying that to look at what the ideas are culturally and internally that may be causing those preferences. Because a lot of times when you look at it, what you find behind that is stereotypes that are ingrained, that aren't true, for one thing. But even beyond that, it comes from what we've absorbed about someone, and just because of their race or because of their weight or whatever. And so racism can take a part in our sexual preferences. But at the same time, I don't want to like shame someone for your preference. I just want to make people aware that there are influences on your preferences.
Yeah, so let's make that real, right? If somebody sets up a account on, say, like onlyasians.com or like some dating website that's specifically set up to for particularly white people, frankly, but for somebody who's maybe outside of a particular race or culture to be connected to somebody from a particular race or culture, if you're setting up that Only Asians account because you assume or believe that every woman you meet is going to be thin and demure and very subservient, these different things, that we can categorically say is racism, and that's wrong and that's hurtful. Are we comfortable with saying that websites like this shouldn't exist and are categorically bad?
Moderately comfortable.
I can play the Jeopardy tune, or we can. Yeah. So, Ming, you've raised an interesting question that I think is challenging in a lot of ways.
I think, Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
I would say that
I
we're gonna play this game all night. You go first.
Sorry, Michelle. So the thing the problem I see is that I'm Asian myself. And I know a lot of, gay guys, Caucasian people will not be attracted to me. And it's simply the fact that when I look at the profile of these people, the commonalities among them is that they are attracted to people who have, like broad shoulder or, big muscular body or deep voice, blue hair, blue eyes, blonde hair, etc. And when I look at myself, I see, I have double eyelids, I have high nose, but and I have pretty good shape body. But I don't have the category that fits the attraction profile of those guys fit for. And apparently on the media, a majority of Asian people are presented in a way like they have flat nose, or they are mono eyelid, or they're skinny, or they are feminine, etc. So of course it will play into the stereotype that the majority of Caucasian on the media present as really uber masculine type of people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't blame them for saying that I don't want Asian people, because a majority of Asian represented on the media tend to fit the profile they don't attracted to. And so of course, if they are more exposure to Asian people who have who are really tall and who have fair skin, or double eyelid or high nose, and of course, probably they may be attracted to those guys. So I feel like the term racism applies to those are not fair to white men, and I speak it as a minority. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, we have an unfortunate correlation in our culture with the idea that if someone if there is racism present, it's only because someone has an intentional racism, instead of the fact that it's actually all around us in our society and it's affecting us whether we like it or not.
Constant and implicit and ingrained in so many different places. What were you saying, Michelle?
Oh, well, I was going to say, let's say you could talk to me at the end of my life, and I reflect on my life and say, okay, I never dated a black woman. I could not ethically sit for myself, in my current state, say I would never date a black woman. It just because if I could project towards the end of my life and say, well, that never happened, I should still be open to people, regardless of their race. But I can appreciate people who think that they know what they're attracted to, but they're excluding so many humans that are awesome.
Yeah. How often do we find ourselves saying, this is my new so-and-so, I'm incredibly excited, not my usual, And we end up believing in these narratives, and we have these self-identities of, well, I'm only attracted to people who are this particular height, this weight, that, they have to absolutely love Joss Whedon movies, like these dumb things. And then somebody crosses our path, and maybe we really feel drawn to them, even though on paper they're not checking off any of those boxes. So I guess if I'm not misinterpreting what you're saying, it's about staying open to experience and sort of accepting that somebody who may not be what you expected might be everything that you're looking for.
Yeah, precisely.
Right? Yeah.
Put it very eloquently. Now, I'm curious if you are... So... Are they people that you're approaching who say that they're not attracted to you, or vice versa, people who, I guess if they approach you, then they hopefully would be attracted to you?
No, Michelle. I don't do online dating, but just my observation. And when I look at myself and the type of people I'm attracted to, for example, let's take Jamie and Eric.
Two very lovely gentlemen hosting another show on the ACA network.
So I can tell you right now, and I hope it will not offend Jamie. When I look at Jamie, he's not the type of guy that I'm really into. It's not that I'm telling myself I don't like him. Mm-hmm. But I guess even though Jamie and Eric are both Caucasian, but that doesn't mean I like all white men, right? But something about Eric that I guess more appealing to me because the way he looks or the way he talks.
It's the dulcet tones of his voice.
Yes, exactly. I guess so.
I hope he's watching this.
Well, I think
people...
Go ahead.
Yeah, and when I look at other Asian guys I'm attracted to, they tend to have similar features like Eric. So they're more lighter skin tone, or maybe a bit honey skin tone, and they tend to be double eyelid like I am, and they tend to be have a higher nose, for example, or they may be some sort of their manner or something that appeal to me. So it's not like I'm only attracted to people of their race, because certain race ethnicity tend to have physical characteristics that appealing to me. So from that observation, I make the conclusion that perhaps those guys on Grindr or Tinder are not really racist. They just tend to be more into people who have the physical characteristics that fit their attraction. That's just how I...
Yeah, and I think that the statistics bear that out. The co-founder of, I want to say, Match.com, I hate to say things without having the reference, but published a book where he talked about some of the analytics that they've discovered and recognized that, people are very, very drawn towards particular races that generally reflect their own. And he talked about how people of particular races were much more or much less likely to get likes or matches or these different things. And we can talk about what goes into that and why that happens. And we could be here all day and all night trying to suss all of that out. I think the takeaway is that everybody be open to different experiences, that they continue to be kind and compassionate towards everybody that they come across, and that they feel comfortable recognizing that a lot of these assumptions are based on that implicit messaging, these racist ideals that are all over our life and that we may not even realize that we have. So we may not identify, I'm not attracted to that person because I'm racist. We may just not be attracted to that person because our dad made an offhanded comment when we were 8 years old that told us that we shouldn't be, and we hold on to it for entirely too long. So like Sarah said, we don't necessarily need to judge ourselves for our attractions and the things that pass between our ears, but we do want to be critically thinking about those things and constantly self-evaluating and examining our own lives. So I hope that helps sort it out a little bit, but definitely this is not a question with an answer, really.
Sure,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. And for all of the folks that we weren't able to get to tonight, I do hope that you will drop us an email, that you'll call us back. We would love to keep the conversation going and to be able to continue to participate. You can certainly check us out on Patreon and send us an email if there's anything else that you might be on your mind. I want to very firmly thank my two guests, especially Michelle for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And be excited about the fact that Sarah will be joining us again next week. Megan will be back as well, and the three of us will be talking about, as Halloween approaches, some maybe more fun and interesting topics as we're getting into role play and costumes and all of the fun stuff this time of year.
It's going to be great.
Right? Yeah, it should be a great time. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you being here with us. We'd love to keep the conversation going. And until then, in the immortal words of our wonderful founder, Dr. David Ray, Daryl Ray, excuse me, we would like to just encourage each of you to be kind to one another, to be open to experiences, and maybe to take this moment to give yourself a nice big ol' orgasm. Or, better yet, to give somebody else one.
Yeah.